The news arrived at the palace like a thunderclap in the middle of a clear winter sky. The regent, the most powerful man in the empire and the father of my child, had returned from the battlefield victorious, but he had left something vital behind. He had not brought back a new lover, nor had he brought back foreign treasures. Instead, he had left his memories in the dust of the frontier. Donald had injured his head, and the physician's report was grimly concise. He had forgotten the last 5 years. He had forgotten our marriage, the intimacy we had cultivated, and he had forgotten Leo, the little prince I had borne him. His mind had snapped back to his ambitious, ruthless youth, a time when he trusted no one and sought to conquer the world for himself alone. Upon hearing this, I did not summon the court physicians to lecture me, nor did I weep. I simply changed into the plain, unassuming robes of a common scholar and slipped out of the palace. I needed to see him. I needed to understand what we were dealing with. I arrived at the regent's manor under the cover of darkness. The guards, recognizing my face despite my lack of imperial regalia, allowed me to pass with silent, terrified bows. I signaled for them to remain quiet and made my way to his private study. I intended to surprise him, perhaps to jog his memory with my presence. Instead, I found myself standing outside the paper-lined windows, listening to a conversation that made my blood run cold. "The throne is unstable, and the young master is weak," a voice boomed, Donald's voice, vibrant and ringing with a youthful arrogance I hadn't heard in years. "Why should we not surround the imperial city with the army? We can force that dog emperor to abdicate before the month is out." I froze, my hand hovering over the door latch. Dog emperor. It had been a long time since anyone had dared to call me that. Inside the room, the air was thick with tension. I could imagine Donald standing there, his eyes bright with ambition, completely unaware that his audience was looking at him with expressions of pure horror. "General," a pained voice spoke up. It was Ethan, Donald's most trusted lieutenant and childhood friend. "Sir, please reconsider. 5 years ago, you conquered the capital, yes. But you insisted on gifting it to the current emperor. You said it was a wedding gift. We advised against it countless times, but you were obstinate. You placed him on the throne with your own hands. Now that the child is born, why are you talking about rebellion?" There was a heavy silence. I could picture Donald blinking, his ambitious grin freezing on his face. "I fought for it once already," Donald asked, sounding genuinely baffled. "Wait, who is he? Why would I give my hard-won empire to him? A wedding gift? Are you joking? Am I his secret admirer? Am I pining for his empress?" "No," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly. "Impossible," Donald scoffed, the sound of a hand slamming against a table echoing through the wall. "I would never hand over absolute power for the sake of a woman. I have studied literature since I was 3 and martial arts since I was 4. My life's goal has always been to control my own destiny. I saw the corruption of the court and vowed to overturn it, to become the man above all men. How can you expect me to believe I handed my fate to someone else?" "You weren't pining for the empress," Ethan interrupted, seemingly finding it difficult to speak. "And honestly, the emperor's reaction might be better if you had been." "Then what is it?" Donald demanded. "You are in love with the emperor," Ethan said flatly. "Explicitly. Openly. Before you lost your memory, your affection for him was known throughout the palace. The dragon bed was practically your private territory. You would spend every night there, lying in the emperor's sheets, teasing him with lines that would make a brothel worker blush." I leaned against the wall, a dry smile touching my lips as Ethan continued his recounting of history. "You would say, 'Your Majesty, this humble subject has come to serve you. Please be gentle, I am fragile,'" Ethan recited in a monotone that made the words even more ridiculous. "You would loosen your robes, expose that chest you are so proud of, and say, 'If the Empress knew about us, she wouldn't be angry, would she?' Surely not. You were shameless." I remembered those nights. I would stand by the bed, looking down at Donald as he sprawled across the silk sheets, acting like a fool. To the outside world, he was the terrifying regent, a man of iron and blood. But alone with me, he was a fox spirit who had attained human form, jealous, dramatic, and clingy. "Don't talk to me about an empress," Donald had once whispered, nuzzling my neck. "My harem doesn't even have a female mosquito in it. If I looked at anyone else, you'd have my head, wouldn't you?" But that Donald was gone. The man inside the room now was a volatile youth who looked as if he were about to explode. Impossible, Donald roared. How could I like that dog, Emperor? I do not have a preference for men. I am straight. Sir, your face is getting dark, another lieutenant warned. Ethan is telling the truth. I don't believe it, Donald hissed. I would never submit to another man. If you don't believe us, Ethan said, the sound of sliding wood following his words, look at this. This bookshelf is full of your personal collection. You said these items were the proof of your love. Open it. I heard a sharp intake of breath from Donald. Fine. Although I lack 5 or 6 years of memory, I trust my taste. I must have collected rare calligraphy, ancient weapons, or priceless jade. There was the sound of a drawer sliding open. Silence stretched. A half-eaten pastry? Donald's voice was filled with disgust. Second drawer, Ethan suggested. A hair ribbon? Donald sounded offended. Third drawer. A handful of dried peppercorns. Donald shouted. What kind of garbage is this? Don't look at them with such disdain. Ethan sighed. You told us that these were sacred artifacts. That pastry was the first one the Emperor shared with you. The ribbon bound his hair the night you took the city. The peppercorns. Well, you said they reminded you of his temper. You are lying, Donald snapped. I would not collect trash. I advise you, Ethan said, his voice weary, to stop calling him a dog, Emperor. Usually, you are the one running to him, wagging your tail. I will not be a dog, Donald yelled. Ethan, you rely on our childhood friendship to spout nonsense. I am the regent. I am a conqueror. If you don't remember loving him, Ethan pressed. Do you remember the little prince? Leo? You two had him together. The sound of steel ringing against a scabbard pierced the air. I flinched. Donald had drawn his sword. Do you think I won't cut you down? Donald threatened, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. 2 men cannot produce a child. If you continue this mockery, your head will roll. Fine, fine, Ethan cried out. I surrender. I won't speak of it. I only hope that when you remember, you don't regret threatening to kill me today. Enough talk, Donald grunted, sheathing his blade. We are wasting time. We need to discuss the invasion of the imperial city. We will use my head as a sacrifice to the flag if I fail. The room erupted into a fierce debate on tactical approaches. They argued over supply lines and gate breaches. Donald seemed satisfied. Being a regent is boring, he declared. If I am to rule, I will be the emperor. Outside, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. My hands and feet were cold. I had been the emperor for years, and I was not unprepared for treachery, but hearing it from him was a different kind of wound. Years ago, he had stepped back and lifted me onto the throne. He had let me win. I had even taken the mystical fertility elixir for him, bearing him a son because he so desperately wanted a family. I thought we were past the point of owing each other. I thought we were partners. But now, hearing him call me Dog Emperor with such venom, a headache began to throb behind my eyes. Fine, I thought, a bitter resolve hardening in my chest. Asterisk, if you want to fight, we will fight. Love is a luxury I can discard, but I will not give up my sovereignty. Asterisk, I turned to leave, intending to prepare the Imperial Guard for a siege. But as I spun around, my foot caught the edge of a clay flower pot. It shattered with a deafening crash in the silent courtyard. Who is there? Donald's voice cut through the wall, sharp and deadly. Bring them in. A terrified eunuch who had been trailing me fell to his knees, trembling. But I did not hide. If I was exposed, I would face it with dignity. I straightened my back, dusted off my plain robes, and walked toward the door. I pushed it open and stepped into the light. The room went silent. Donald's lieutenants looked at me, their faces draining of color. They knew who I was. They knew the depth of Donald's obsession with me. They knew how he used to beg me for reassurance, asking, asterisk, Paul, do you love me? Will you always love me? You haven't said it all day. Sometimes I think you only want me for my muscles. Asterisk, but the man standing behind the desk now did not look at me with love. He looked at me with the cold, calculating eyes of a stranger. He was younger in spirit, sharper, radiating a dangerous energy. Who are you? Donald asked, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Then, as his eyes truly focused on my face, something shifted. The lethal edge in his gaze wavered. He blinked, and I watched, fascinated, as the tips of his ears turned a bright, betraying red. It's... Ethan started to speak, stepping forward. Donald shoved Ethan aside without looking at him. He walked around the desk, his eyes locked on mine, shining with a sudden, intense interest. "Are you a new strategist?" Donald asked, his voice losing its command and gaining a hopeful, almost boyish quality. "Do you have a family? Is there someone in your heart? Would you be open to a partner who is also a man?" Ethan slapped his forehead. The other lieutenants looked at the ceiling. "Regent," Ethan hissed. "You just threatened to kill me for suggesting you liked men. What are you doing?" Donald shot him a glare that could have peeled paint. "Shut up. Mind your own business." He turned back to me, his expression softening instantly. Well, the tension in my chest, the anger and the fear, suddenly bubbled up into a laugh. I couldn't help it. He really had forgotten. He was acting exactly like the boy I had met years ago, arrogant, brash, and completely helpless the moment he saw me. He was like a peacock spreading its tail feathers. "I have a family," I said coolly, watching his face. "And I have a lovely child." The light in Donald's beautiful peach blossom eyes died instantly. His shoulders slumped. The disappointment radiating off him was so palpable, it was almost physical. "Oh," he said, his voice raspy. "Then, your wife must be a very lucky woman." He looked genuinely heartbroken. He frowned, touching his chest as if confused by the sudden ache he found there. He didn't understand why he was jealous of a stranger's spouse. "Yes," I said, enjoying his misery slightly. "My partner loves me very much. Though, recently, he has been thinking about rebellion. He wants to usurp my position." Donald frowned, trying to focus. "That is terrible. But, wait, rebellion. I heard you were discussing a coup," I said, walking past him toward the table where the map was spread out. "Is this the plan?" The lieutenants parted like the Red Sea as I approached. The map was detailed, marking the secret passages of the imperial city. "This is very thorough," I commented, tracing a line with my finger. "Are you planning to intercept the Dog Emperor in these tunnels?" Donald shook himself, trying to regain his composure. He cleared his throat, forcing his professional persona back into place. "Yes. The Chu family creates incompetent rulers. The old ones were greedy, the young one is tyrannical. The people suffer. I am simply doing what must be done." "Is that so?" I asked, looking him in the eye. "Absolutely," Donald said, puffing out his chest. "Look here. These tunnels lead to the barracks. The craftsmen left them open for the Gu family army. The people trust my family more than the royals." Ethan was in the corner making frantic hand signals, trying to tell Donald to stop talking, but Donald was too busy trying to impress the pretty strategist. "You see," Donald boasted, "I have the advantage. The Emperor is isolated." I nodded slowly. "He is indeed. I knew these tunnels. I knew them because 5 years ago, during the actual civil war, Donald had used them to smuggle me out of the palace. He had woken me in the middle of the night, dressed in full armor, his face smeared with soot and blood. He had kissed my forehead and said, "Paul, if I die tonight, you are not allowed to forget me." He had fought for me. He had taken the lashes meant for me when the other princes bullied me. He had handed me a whip once, when we were teenagers, and told me to strike anyone who disrespected me, promising to bear the consequences. And now, I thought, looking at the map, he wants to use the same tunnels to kill me. "Strategist," Donald said, breaking my reverie. "Do you think this plan is feasible?" I stood up, smoothing my robes. "Feasible? Perhaps. But tell me, Regent, what will you do with the Emperor once you catch him?" "Behead him," Donald said confidently. "Hang his head from the city gates. Let the world know the Chu dynasty is finished. Then, perhaps you and I could get a drink." I stared at him. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. "Regent," I said, my voice dropping to 0 degrees. "You seem to hold a deep grudge against the royal family." "The world hates them," Donald shrugged. "Why shouldn't I?" "Very well." I turned on my heel. "I have seen enough." "Wait," Donald called out, misinterpreting my coldness for moral objection. "If beheading is too cruel, we can just imprison him or exile. I can be merciful. Good luck with your rebellion," I said, not looking back. I stormed out of the room. Ethan scrambled after me. "Your Majesty," Ethan whispered urgently as we reached the courtyard. "Please, he is not in his right mind." His memory is 6 years gone. He doesn't know it's you. He wants to hang my head from the gate, I said dryly. He's an idiot, Ethan pleaded. But you know he loves you. If you had let the guards kill him tonight, or if he actually succeeded and then remembered later, he would commit suicide on your grave. You know he would. I stopped walking. The night air was crisp. I looked up at the moon. Ethan was right. Donald was a fool, but he was my fool. Tell him, I said, that I will be waiting for him at the morning court. If he wants the throne, let him come and take it. The next morning, the atmosphere in the throne room was suffocating. The Imperial Guard was doubled, lining the walls with stone-faced grimness. Hidden in the shadows were my personal assassins. I sat on the high throne, wearing the full weight of the Imperial regalia, twisting the jade ring on my thumb. The court session was halfway over, and the regent had not appeared. The ministers were whispering. Is he finally making his move? One muttered. He's showing his disdain, another whispered. Finally, when the sun was high, the heavy doors groaned open. Donald strode in. He was not wearing armor. He was wearing his official court robes, a magnificent purple garment embroidered with 5-clawed dragons, a privilege I had granted him years ago. He walked with a swagger that sucked the air out of the room, his chin held high, looking at the ministers as if they were insects. I have a petition, Donald announced loudly, not bothering to bow. He scanned the room, sneering at the trembling officials. Then he looked up. His gaze traveled up the dais, past the guards, and landed on me. He froze. His mouth opened slightly. He blinked. I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. He looked at my face, the face of the strategist he had flirted with the night before. He looked at the golden dragon embroidered on my chest. He looked at the crown resting on my head. His face went from pale to a deep, burning crimson in the span of a heartbeat. Ethan, standing behind him, looked like he had aged 10 years in a single night. He had bags under his eyes and a blister on his lip. Donald took a breath. The arrogant sneer vanished. He ripped the official cap from his head and threw it on the floor. I quit, Donald shouted, his voice cracking. I don't want to be regent. Oh, I raised an eyebrow, leaning forward. And what do you want to be? Donald took a step forward, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. He looked like he was about to cry or fight, or possibly both. I want to be the imperial husband, he bellowed. The entire court went silent. A pin dropping would have sounded like a cannon blast. I stared at him. We can discuss private matters later. If there is no other business. No, Donald interrupted. To the horror of the court, the terrifying regent of the empire suddenly sat down on the floor, crossing his legs like a petulant child. I'm not leaving. Ethan said I've been sleeping with you for 6 years. 6 years, Paul. A man only has so many prime years. You've been using me like a concubine and refusing to give me a title. You act like I'm a dog to be walked and then put back in the kennel. Donald, I warned, massaging my temple. You abandoned your husband and child, he accused, pointing a shaking finger at me. If you don't give me an official title today, I am moving into the palace and I am never leaving. I used to live here, didn't I? I'm moving back in. I sighed. I waved my hand, dismissing the court. The ministers fled as if the building were on fire, eager to escape the domestic dispute of the century. When the doors clicked shut, I descended the stairs. I walked up to Donald, who was still sitting on the floor, breathing heavily. I reached down and took his chin in my hand, forcing him to look up at me. You were calling me a dog emperor yesterday, I said softly. Now you want a title? What happened to the rebellion? Donald's face burned. He leaned into my touch instinctively, rubbing his cheek against my palm before realizing what he was doing and freezing. I got the timing wrong, he mumbled, refusing to meet my eyes. And Ethan's story sounded insane. I thought you had bribed him. How was I supposed to know? And you believe him now? I'm a straight man, Donald whispered, his voice trembling. But seeing you, I think I can make an exception. Besides, if we are married, what does it matter who sits on the throne? It all goes to our son eventually anyway. Why would I rebel against my own family? He glanced up at me through his long lashes. So, will you give me the title? I looked at him. He was beautiful, powerful, and utterly ridiculous. But there was a serious matter to address. The harem cannot interfere with politics, I said sternly. If you want to be the imperial husband, you must hand over the military command. You must give me the tiger tally. Donald went still. This was the test. Before his memory loss, this had been our stalemate. He loved me, but he feared that without the army, he would lose his value to me. He feared I would discard him. You want my power? He asked quietly. I want to know where you stand, I replied. He stared at my lips. Then, without a word, he lunged. He wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me down until I crashed into his chest. Paul, he breathed, his voice thick with desire. Are you trying to seduce me into giving up my army? Because it might work. I stared at him, startled. Is that all it takes? I don't know, he murmured, leaning closer. Kiss me, and let's find out. He was inches away from my mouth when the heavy doors creaked open again. Daddy, a small voice echoed in the vast hall. Did you bring me a toy? Donald scrambled back as if he had been burned. We both looked toward the entrance. A small, round figure was standing there, rubbing his sleepy eyes. It was Leo. Leo marched over to us, waving away the nursemaids. He looked exactly like a miniature Donald. Same nose, same stubborn chin. Father, Leo said, looking at me, then at Donald. Is Daddy crying again? Shame on him. Donald gaped at the child. Crying? I am not crying. Daddy cries when he wants attention, Leo explained to me wisely. He thinks it makes him look pretty. Be careful, Father, or he'll make you give him candy. You little brat. Donald gasped. I am your father. Show some respect. This is the son I gave you. Donald whispered to me, looking horrified. He's not cute at all. He looks like me, but he has your sharp tongue. Can we send him back? Can we make a new one? A smaller version of you. Leo's lip began to wobble. Daddy doesn't want me? Don't cry, Donald panicked, reaching out to pinch Leo's cheek. Stop it. I don't like crying. Leo immediately burst into tears. That night was chaotic. Donald played with Leo until the boy passed out, then hovered awkwardly by my bed. Where? Where do I sleep? He asked, his face red. In my hand, I said, making a crude joke about his earlier behavior. He blushed so hard I thought he might faint. But eventually, I led him to the royal bath. I washed him, watching his youthful, confused reactions to my touch. He was shy in a way the older Donald never was. When I finished and left him to soak, he looked devastated that I wasn't staying. I went to bed alone, but in the middle of the night, I felt a heavy weight settle on the mattress. A warm body slid up behind me, wrapping around me like a vine. I smiled in the darkness and drifted off. When I woke the next morning, my head was resting on something hard and cold. I reached under my pillow and pulled out a heavy piece of metal. It was the tiger tally, the command of the entire military. There, Donald's voice said from beside me. He was propped up on one elbow, grinning. You wanted it. You got it. I looked at him, stunned. You're giving it to me? Just like that. The old me was stupid, Donald said dismissively. He was insecure. He didn't think you loved him enough. But I know better. I have great stamina, a handsome face, and excellent muscles. Why wouldn't you love me? Besides, he leaned in and kissed my cheek. If you betray me, I'll just cry until you feel guilty. It seems to be my superpower. You are an idiot, I said, clutching the tally. Write the decree, he demanded, producing a blank scroll and a brush from under the blankets. Make me the imperial husband. Now, I laughed and wrote the order. He took it, blew on the ink to dry it, and tucked it into his robe next to his heart. Weeks passed. We thought the memory loss might be permanent, and honestly, I didn't mind. This Donald was energetic and uncomplicated. But one morning, after a particularly vigorous debate with the ministers where he threatened to die on the spot if they didn't approve the budget, he came back to the palace looking strange. He walked up to me, his eyes dark and swirling with a mix of emotions. Paul, he said. His voice was deeper. The boyishness was gone. You said you liked the other me better. I paused. Donald, he's still here, Donald said, tapping his temple. The young idiot. He's screaming in my head that I gave up the army too easily. But I remember now. I remember everything. He pulled me into a crushing embrace. But he was right about one thing. I shouldn't have waited so long to claim my title. Epilogue. Leo's diary asterisk. I am the only prince of the empire, but my life is hard. My father is the emperor, and my daddy is the imperial husband. They never have time for me. Asterisk asterisk. Father always complains that his waist hurts. Whenever he says that, Daddy gets a very smug look on his face and rushes to help him. I tried it once. I walked up to Daddy and said, "My waist hurts." Asterisk asterisk Daddy's face turned black. He spanked me. He said children shouldn't say such things. Asterisk asterisk I asked the grand tutor why I have two fathers. He sighed and looked at the sky. "It is against the ancestors," he said. "But your ancestors are the Gu and Chu families. They never followed the rules anyway." Asterisk asterisk I looked at Father, sitting on the throne, and Daddy, sitting on the floor next to him, peeling a grape. The tutor is right. We are a strange family. But Daddy promised that if I am good, he will teach me how to conquer a city. So I think I will keep them. Asterisk.